The echo of gunfire had barely faded from Shadow Canyon when Thomas Blackwood opened his eyes to darkness. Blood trickled from the gash above his temple, each heartbeat sending fresh pain radiating through his skull. Dead men surrounded him. The driver, the guard, and 3 fellow passengers all sprawled in unnatural stillness. The Collingwood gang had been ruthlessly efficient, leaving no witnesses. Or so they thought. Thomas had survived by instinct alone, collapsing at the first shot, a bullet grazing rather than penetrating. Now, as moon shadows stretched across the canyon floor, he fought to stay conscious, knowing that discovery meant certain death. The stage lay on its side, horses gone, strongbox emptied, and all around him stretched wilderness that forgave no weakness. Thomas knew 2 things with absolute certainty. He was the only survivor of the worst stage robbery in Arizona Territory history. And if he didn't move soon, the mountain cold would finish what the Collingwood gang had started. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Thomas tried to rise but collapsed with a strangled groan. The wound in his leg, previously hidden by shock, now announced itself with searing clarity. The bullet had passed clean through the meat of his thigh, missing bone, but leaving him immobilized and bleeding. With trembling hands, he tore strips from his shirt, binding the wound as best he could in the pale moonlight. Every sound, a distant coyote's howl, the rustle of nighttime creatures, sent him into momentary panic. The Collingwood gang often circled back to ensure their grisly work was complete. "Keep moving," he whispered to himself, the sound of his own voice startling in the night's stillness. "Just keep moving." Using a broken piece of the stagecoach as a makeshift crutch, Thomas pulled himself upright. The world swam before his eyes, darkness threatening at the edges of his vision. 5 dead, all shot execution style after the robbery. The memory of Marshall Foster, the guard who'd traveled this route for 20 years, begging for mercy before a bullet silenced him forever, would haunt Thomas for however long he had left to live. The nearest settlement was Copper Springs, nearly 30 miles north. The opposite direction led deeper into Apache territory, dangerous, but perhaps his only chance. The Collingwood gang wouldn't expect a survivor to head away from civilization. With each painful step, Thomas left a trail obvious to even the most inexperienced tracker. Broken twigs, disturbed earth, occasional drops of blood. But he had no choice. Stay meant death. Move meant a slightly delayed death, perhaps, but at least he was fighting. The first rays of dawn found him collapsed beneath a rocky outcropping, fever beginning to grip his body. The wound in his leg had swollen, angry red streaks extending outward. Blood. Poisoning would claim him within days if the gang, exposure, or wild animals didn't get him first. Thomas leaned back against the cool stone, closing his eyes for what he believed would be the last time. "You are dying, white man," the voice jarred Thomas from his half-conscious state. Standing before him was a Cherokee man, his weathered face, impassive dark eyes studying Thomas with neither compassion nor malice, merely assessment. A Winchester rifle rested comfortably in his hands, not aimed at Thomas, but ready nonetheless. "The men who did this," the Cherokee continued, crouching to examine Thomas's leg wound, "they were many?" "5, Thomas rasped, his throat paper dry. "The Collingwood gang." Something flickered across the Cherokee's face, recognition, perhaps even hatred. "Collingwood." He spoke the name like a curse. "We know this man. He trades in blood." Thomas attempted to sit up straighter, wincing with the effort. "Who are you?" "I'm called Two Ravens." He studied the horizon, then Thomas's pitiful condition. "The Collingwood gang follows your trail. They know someone survived." Terror gripped Thomas anew. "How far behind?" 2 hours, maybe less. Two Ravens. Stood, decision made. You will die here, or you may die trying to live. Choose quickly. Thomas met the Cherokee's gaze. I choose to live. Something approaching approval crossed Two Ravens' face. With surprising gentleness, he helped Thomas to his feet. Then we must go where eagles make their home and white men fear to tread. Every step was agony as Two Ravens led him higher into the mountains. Away from the trail Thomas had blindly followed. The Cherokee moved with quiet efficiency, occasionally stopping to obscure their tracks or listen to the wilderness around them. By midday, Thomas was delirious with fever, barely conscious as Two Ravens half carried him up a nearly invisible path. Why? Thomas managed between labored breaths. Why help me? Two Ravens continued walking, his pace unrelenting. Enemy of my enemy. Collingwood's men killed my brother 3 moons ago. His voice remained steady, but Thomas sensed the depth of emotion beneath. And perhaps the spirits have not finished with you yet. They reached a small cave. As afternoon shadows lengthened across the mountainside, Two Ravens eased Thomas down onto a bed of pine boughs, then disappeared briefly, returning with herbs and a water skin. Drink, he commanded, supporting Thomas's head. Then I must clean the wound. It will bring pain. Pain and I are old friends now, Thomas murmured, but when Two Ravens began removing the crude bandage, his scream echoed through the cave before darkness mercifully claimed him. Thomas drifted in and out of consciousness, time losing all meaning. Sometimes he heard Two Ravens speaking softly in Cherokee. Other times felt cool cloths on his burning forehead. Fever dreams plagued him. The robbery replayed in endless variations, each death more vivid than the last. In his lucid moments, he caught glimpses of the outside world through the cave opening, stars wheeling overhead, sun tracking across a narrow slice of sky, occasionally the silhouette of Two Ravens standing guard. On what might have been the 3rd day, Thomas awoke. With surprising clarity, the fever had broken. Two Ravens sat cross-legged at the cave entrance, carving something from a piece of wood. They have not given up, the Cherokee said without looking up. Twice they have come close. The white man Collingwood, he offers gold to anyone who finds you. Thomas struggled to sit up, noting with surprise that his leg wound had been expertly cleaned and wrapped with fresh bandages. How did you learn this? I have ears in many places, Two Ravens replied. Among my people, among yours. He set aside his carving. Why does Collingwood want you dead so badly? You are not the law. Thomas closed his eyes, the memory washing over him with sickening clarity. Because I saw his face. He always wears a mask during robberies, but it slipped when he was killing the others. I saw him, and worse, he saw me see him. Ah. Two Ravens nodded slowly. Then you carry his death in your eyes. Or my own, Thomas said bitterly. The Cherokee studied him thoughtfully. You were a soldier once. It wasn't a question. Thomas looked up sharply. How did you know? The way you fell, Two Ravens explained. Even wounded and afraid, you fell like a man trained to avoid bullets. And this. He gestured to Thomas's forearm, where a faded tattoo marked him as former cavalry. 10th Regiment, you fought my cousins in the Plains Wars. Shame crept through Thomas, unexpected and unwelcome. I did. Two Ravens nodded, his expression unreadable. And now you run from white men, while an Indian saves your life. The spirits have strange humor. Outside, a sudden silence fell. The birds had stopped singing. Two Ravens moved with liquid grace to the cave entrance, rifle ready. Thomas held his breath, listening. For several heartbeats, nothing. Then the faint sound of horses' hooves on. Stone drifted up from below. They are persistent, Two Ravens whispered. They're killers, Thomas replied. They won't stop until I'm dead. Two Ravens glanced back at Thomas, decision crystallizing in his eyes. Then perhaps it is time to give them what they seek. Two Ravens moved with the silence of a mountain cat, gesturing for Thomas to stay hidden in the shadows of the cave. Outside, The afternoon light cast long fingers through the pines as a hawk circled overhead, its piercing cry the only sound. Breaking the unnatural stillness, 3 riders, 2 ravens whispered, his body perfectly still as he peered through a narrow gap in the rocks. "One is the man with the red beard, Collingwood's brother." Thomas's mouth went dry. Seth Collingwood was known to be even more sadistic than his infamous brother. The stories of what he'd done to Apache scouts who'd crossed his path had spread through even the most remote settlements. "He will smell your fear if you let it rule you," 2 ravens said, his dark eyes flickering to Thomas's trembling hands. "Breathe like I showed you." Thomas forced air deep into his lungs, focusing on the rough texture of stone against his palms. Below, hoofbeats approached, then slowed. "Tracks end here," a voice called out, the words drifting up the mountainside. "Injun tracks mixed with his. Bastard found help. Search every cave, every crevice," came the reply, the voice cold as December steel. "James wants the witness dead before week's end. $100 gold to whoever finds him first." 2 ravens reached slowly for his rifle, but a violent tremor suddenly seized Thomas's wounded leg. A loose stone shifted beneath him, clattering down the rock face. In the silence, it might as well have been a cannon shot. "You hear that?" The voices below hushed, followed by the metallic click of weapons being primed. 2 ravens moved with practiced precision, pulling Thomas deeper into the cave, where a narrow tunnel led backward into darkness. "There is another way," he breathed against Thomas's ear. "But you must trust me completely." Thomas nodded, sweat beading on his forehead. Despite the cave's chill, 2 ravens guided him through the twisting passage, the darkness absolute. Thomas's fingertips brushed against slick rock, his nostrils filled with the mineral scent of underground water and something else, something ancient and undisturbed. Behind them, voices echoed, growing louder. Light flickered at the tunnels. "Entrance torches, found tracks, they're in here." The tunnel suddenly opened into a larger chamber, where faint light filtered through a crack in the ceiling. 2 ravens paused at the edge of a black void. An underground stream had carved a narrow chasm through the mountain's heart. "We jump," the Cherokee said simply. Thomas stared in disbelief. "That's suicide." "Perhaps." 2 ravens' face remained impassive. "The water runs deep below. I have made this journey before." The sound of pursuit grew closer, the orange glow of torches reflecting off the tunnel walls. "Trust or die," 2 ravens said. "Choose." Thomas looked back at the approaching lights, then at the abyss before him. Without another word, he gripped 2 ravens' outstretched hand, and together they leaped into darkness. The shock of cold water drove the air from Thomas's lungs. The current seized them immediately, dragging them through the mountain's veins. Thomas fought against panic, his wounded legs screaming in protest as they were battered against unseen rocks. 2 ravens' grip remained iron-strong, anchoring him against the chaotic rush. When they finally emerged into daylight, it was through a hidden waterfall on the mountain's far side. 2 ravens pulled them onto a narrow ledge, both men gasping for breath. Below them stretched a valley Thomas had never seen, ringed by peaks that seemed to touch the sky itself. "Cherokee hunting grounds," 2 ravens explained between breaths. "Few white men have seen this place and lived." Thomas collapsed against the rocks, exhaustion claiming him. "Why risk your life for me?" The truth, this time. 2 ravens was silent for a long moment, wringing water from his long black hair. "The Collingwood brothers took more than my brother's life," he finally said. "They took something sacred to my people. I tracked them for weeks before I found you." "What did they take?" "The heart of the mountain," 2 ravens replied, his voice dropping to reverence. "A stone passed through my family for generations. It holds power." He met Thomas's questioning gaze. Your people would call it superstition. Mine know better. And you think I can help you get it back? You have seen James Collingwood's face. You know how his men move, how they think. Two Ravens' expression hardened. And you carry something. They want badly enough to risk coming into Cherokee territory. Realization dawned on Thomas. You're using me as bait. The ghost of a smile crossed Two Ravens' face. We use each other, white man. The difference is I have been honest about it. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Night had fallen by the time they made their way down to a small clearing where Two Ravens had established a hidden camp. The Cherokee lit a small, nearly smokeless fire, then vanished briefly into the darkness, returning with a bundle of roots and leaves. Your wound reopens, he said, nodding at the fresh blood seeping through Thomas's bandages. The water did not help. As Two Ravens prepared a poultice, Thomas studied him in the firelight. You were educated by white men. Two Ravens didn't look up from his work. Presbyterian Mission School, 8 years. His hands moved with practiced efficiency. They tried to kill the Cherokee in me. They failed. When the medicine was applied, Thomas hissed through clenched teeth, the burning sensation almost unbearable. What was that mission's name? St. Joseph's, near Fort Laramie. Two Ravens' eyes narrowed with suspicion. Why? Because I think we've met before, Thomas said quietly. During the winter of '78, a supply wagon train was ambushed. I was one of the soldiers sent to investigate. Two Ravens went utterly still, the firelight casting his face in shadow. 3 Cherokee boys were blamed, hanged without trial. Thomas looked away. I know. I was the one who argued against it. Not hard enough, Two Ravens said, his voice like flint striking steel. No, Thomas admitted, not hard enough. The silence between them grew heavy, broken only by the soft crackle of the fire and night sounds from the forest. Finally, Two Ravens spoke again. The past is written in blood. Tomorrow brings new words. He handed Thomas a strip of dried meat. Eat, then I will show you what we face. After their meager meal, Two Ravens unfolded a piece of buckskin on which he'd drawn a crude map. Collingwood's men have a camp here, he said, pointing to a spot near a river bend. 12 men, including both brothers. They divided after the stage robbery. Half continued to their hideout with the gold, half hunt for you. How do you know all this? I have watched them for days. And Two Ravens hesitated, then reached into a pouch at his waist, withdrawing, something that caught the firelight like a captured star. The heart sometimes shows visions. Thomas leaned closer. It was a crystal unlike any he'd seen, seemingly clear one moment, then swirling with iridescent colors the next. That's what they stole from you. Two Ravens quickly returned it to his pouch. Only part. They have its companion piece, larger, more powerful. Together they guided my people for generations. His expression darkened. James Collingwood believes it will lead him to a lost Spanish gold mine. Will it? It will lead him to his death, Two Ravens said with quiet certainty. The heart does not suffer the touch of those with darkness inside them. Not for long. Thomas absorbed this, unsure what to believe. So your plan is for us, just the two of us, to somehow infiltrate a camp of 12 killers, retrieve your sacred stone and escape alive? Two Ravens' smile was cold in the firelight. No, my plan is to make them come to us, on ground of my choosing, in a way they do not expect. He looked directly at Thomas. Tomorrow, you become a ghost. As Thomas drifted toward exhausted sleep, the pain in his leg dulled by Two Ravens' medicine, he pondered the Cherokee's words. Become a ghost. The notion should have terrified him, yet strangely, it brought a measure of peace. He had already died once, after all, left for dead among corpses. Perhaps Ghost was exactly what he had become. In his dreams, the stage robbery played out again, but this time he saw details his waking mind had missed. The way James Collingwood's eyes had widened in surprise when his mask slipped. The unusual ring he wore, gold set with a crystal that caught the light oddly. The whispered conversation between the brothers afterward, words Thomas couldn't quite make out, but sensed were important. He awoke suddenly to two ravens' hand pressed against his mouth. "They have found us," the Cherokee whispered, his eyes glittering in the pre-dawn darkness. The world condensed to a single moment. Two ravens' warning breath against Thomas's ear, the pre-dawn chill seeping through his clothes, and the unmistakable sound of men trying to move quietly through unfamiliar terrain. Thomas reached instinctively for a weapon that wasn't there. "How many?" he mouthed silently. Two ravens held up 3 fingers, then pointed to the east, where the first hint of grey light breached the horizon. With practiced efficiency, he extinguished all traces of their small fire, then guided Thomas toward a dense thicket of juniper. "Stay!" he commanded in a whisper barely louder than a heartbeat. "No matter what you hear." Before Thomas could protest, 2 ravens melted into the shadows, leaving nothing but disturbed air behind. The Cherokee moved with such fluid grace that, even knowing which direction he'd gone, Thomas lost sight of him within seconds. Minutes stretched like years, as Thomas huddled in the freezing undergrowth, his wound throbbing in time with his racing pulse. Fog rolled through the valley below, transforming the landscape into something otherworldly, a place where spirits might indeed walk between worlds. The first scream shattered the silence like glass breaking on stone. It came from the north, cut off abruptly in a way that told its own story. The second cry followed moments later from the opposite direction, a shout of alarm that dissolved into gurgling terror. "Daniels! Morgan!" A panicked voice called from somewhere too close. "Where are you boys?" Thomas recognized that voice. Ben Hawley, one of the Collingwood gang's scouts, known for tracking down witnesses who'd had the misfortune of surviving the gang's previous crimes. Thomas had seen him exactly once, silhouetted against the setting sun as the stage was being robbed, but the man's distinctive Texas drawl was unmistakable. "I know someone's out there," Hawley called, fear sharpening his words. "Come on out and face me like a man." The irony of a cold-blooded killer demanding fair play might have been amusing under different circumstances. Now it only heightened the surreal quality of the moment, the hunter becoming prey. A whisper of movement behind Thomas sent ice through his veins. He turned, expecting to find 2 ravens, but instead locked eyes with a 4th gang member who'd circled around undetected. The man's weather-beaten face registered shock, then savage triumph. "Found you," he hissed, raising his rifle. Thomas lunged forward on pure instinct, his wounded leg forgotten in the desperate rush of survival. He caught the man mid-motion, sending them both crashing through the juniper. The rifle discharged harmlessly into the air as they tumbled down a short embankment, landing hard on the rocky ground below. Pain exploded through Thomas's leg, but adrenaline kept him moving. He grappled for control of the weapon, his fingers finding purchase on cold metal. The outlaw's fist connected with his jaw, stars bursting across his vision. Thomas tasted blood, copper bright and hot, as he fought with the strength of desperation. "Hawley!" the man shouted. "Over here! I got—" His words ended in a wet gasp. Thomas felt warm liquid splash across his face and hands. Above them stood 2 ravens, a bloody knife gripped in his hand, expression unreadable in the growing dawn light. "I told you to stay hidden," the Cherokee said flatly. Thomas rolled away from the dead man, bile rising in his throat. There was a 4th. "I know." 2 ravens cleaned his blade on the dead man's shirt. "The one called Hawley still lives. He runs to bring others." Thomas struggled to his feet, using the dead man's rifle for support. "Then we need to move." 2 ravens shook his head. No, now we make you a ghost, he surveyed Thomas critically. The clothes, take them off. Thomas stared in confusion, but the Cherokee was already stripping the corpse of its blood-stained jacket and hat. Understanding dawned slowly. You want them to think I'm dead. The white man's clothes will fit you poorly, but blood hides many flaws. Two ravens worked methodically, positioning the body face down, and dead men cannot speak of what they never saw. 20 minutes later, Thomas wore the dead outlaw's clothes, his face and hands smeared with blood, some his own, some belonging to the man now wrapped in Thomas's distinctive cavalry coat. Two ravens had taken a lock of Thomas's hair, placing it carefully in the dead man's hand, then mutilated the face beyond recognition, using his knife. They will find this body and believe it yours, two ravens explained. The man's companions will identify his clothes, but in their haste and fear, they will see what they expect to see. Thomas fought against nausea as he watched the Cherokee work. This isn't my first deception of death, he said quietly, but I've never been so involved in the staging of it. Two ravens looked up, something like grim amusement crossing his features. The best lies contain truth. You were here. There was a struggle. A man died. He stood, surveying his handiwork. Only the names have been changed. They retreated higher into the mountains as sunlight fully claimed the valley. From their vantage point among wind-twisted pines, they watched 7 riders approach the site of the morning's violence. Even at this distance, Thomas recognized James Collingwood by his distinctive black hat and the way the others deferred. To him, they find the bodies, two ravens murmured. Through the scout's battered brass spyglass, Thomas observed the scene unfolding below. Collingwood dismounted, examining each corpse in turn. When he reached the mutilated body in Thomas's coat, he knelt for a long moment, then stood with a victorious gesture. He believes the deception, Thomas whispered. For now, two ravens reclaimed his spyglass. Tonight they will celebrate your death. Tomorrow they will be careless. As they watched, Collingwood removed something from inside his vest. A large crystal similar to the one two ravens carried, but twice the size. Even at this distance, it seemed to capture the sunlight unnaturally, sending prismatic reflections dancing among the trees. The heart, two ravens breathed, his stoic demeanor cracking slightly. He carries it with him. Thomas studied the Cherokee's face, seeing naked longing there. What's the true power of these stones? No folklore this time. Two ravens was silent for so long that Thomas thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of generations. The smaller stone finds the larger, always. They pull toward each other, stronger than any compass. He touched the pouch at his waist. But more than this, they show paths. Unseen, water beneath the desert passes through mountains thought impassable, game trails rich with prey. His eyes darkened. In the old days, they guided war parties unerringly to their enemies, and that's why Collingwood wants them, Thomas concluded. Not for some Spanish gold mine, but as a weapon. A man who can move unseen through territory, who always knows where his enemies are. Two ravens let the implication hang in the air. The army would pay fortunes for such power. Below, Collingwood returned the crystal to his vest. Orders were shouted, and the men began gathering the bodies of their fallen comrades. Tonight, two ravens said with quiet certainty, we reclaim what was stolen, and you will have your vengeance for those who died on that stage. As dusk approached, they made their way carefully down the mountain, skirting the main trail used by Collingwood's men. Thomas's wounded leg had begun to stiffen again, but two ravens' herbal poultice kept the pain manageable. More concerning was the fever that threatened to return, a dull heat building beneath his skin. Tell me about the others, two ravens said as they picked their way through a boulder field. The ones who died on the stage. Thomas hadn't expected the question. Why do you ask? "Because you carry their weight," the Cherokee replied simply. "I see it in how you move, even beyond your wounds. Their deaths sit on your shoulders." Thomas was silent for several steps, memories washing over him. There was an elderly couple, the Prescotts, traveling to see their daughter's new baby in Silver City. A young woman, Miss Abigail Thornton, schoolteacher headed for her first position, and Marshall Foster, the guard. He swallowed hard. "I only knew them for 2 days. We shared meals, stories, and you lived while they died," Two Ravens finished for him. "You wonder why the spirits chose you, wouldn't you?" Two Ravens paused, gazing toward the setting sun. "My people believe each death has purpose, as does each life spared. Perhaps you were saved to bring justice, perhaps for something else entirely." His dark eyes settled on Thomas. "But questioning the spirit's choice dishonors their gift." Thomas absorbed this, finding unexpected comfort in the Cherokee's philosophy. "And what about you? What purpose do the spirits have for you?" "To be the guardian of the heart, as my father was, and his father before him." Two Ravens' expression hardened. "Until I failed in my duty." They continued in silence until they reached a ridge overlooking the outlaw camp. Cook fires blazed below, surrounded by men passing bottles and laughing raucously. Celebration, just as Two Ravens had predicted. 14 men, Thomas counted softly. "More than you thought." "Numbers matter less than awareness," Two Ravens replied, "and they believe themselves safe here." As darkness settled fully over the land, their planning grew more detailed. Two Ravens sketched the camp layout in the dirt, marking guard positions, and identifying the brothers' tent at the center. The smaller crystal had begun to pulse faintly in its pouch, drawn toward its larger companion below. "I will create a distraction there," Two Ravens indicated the horse corral. "While they deal with stampeding horses, you will enter here." He pointed to the rear of the main tent. Thomas studied the crude map skeptically. "And if James Collingwood is inside, then one of us will die," Two Ravens said with simple finality. "But the heart will be reclaimed either way." As Thomas checked the action on his stolen rifle, he realized something had fundamentally changed within him. 2 days ago, he had been running for his life, focused solely on survival. Now he moved toward danger willingly, driven by something beyond mere vengeance. "We should wait for deeper night," he suggested, "when more of them are asleep or drunk." Two Ravens nodded approval. "The white man learns patience." "Good." He reached into his medicine pouch, withdrawing a small bundle of herbs. "Chew these. They will keep your mind clear and your hands steady." The bitter herbs numbed Thomas's tongue, but spread clarity through his thoughts. As they settled into wait, a question that had been nagging at him finally found voice. "You never told me your real name." "Two Ravens is what white men call you, isn't it?" The Cherokee's expression softened slightly. "My mother named me Tsalagi Usti, Little Cherokee. My father called me Gola, Winter." A ghost of a smile. "The missionaries named me Joseph Williams. And what do you call yourself?" Two Ravens stared into the darkness, his profile sharp against the star-filled sky. "I am the name I earn each day through my actions. Tonight, perhaps I earn a new one." Below them, the revelry in the camp began to quiet as men sought their bedrolls. The mountainside fell into deeper silence, broken only by the occasional hoot of a hunting owl. "It is time," Two Ravens finally said, rising like a shadow. "Remember, no matter what happens, the heart must be reclaimed." Thomas nodded, gripping the dead outlaw's rifle. "I remember." Side by side, they began their descent toward the sleeping camp, each step bringing them closer to either justice or death, perhaps both. Thomas felt the weight of the murdered passenger's memory, but also something else. The purpose Two Ravens had spoken of, finally taking shape within him. He had been spared for this night. Whatever came after would be another story entirely. Moonlight spilled across the outlaw camp like silver water as Thomas and two ravens descended the rocky slope. The bitter herbs had transformed Thomas's senses. Every sound magnified, every shadow distinct. His wounded leg no longer throbbed, but hummed with a strange, distant pain. "Remember," two ravens whispered, "you move like breath, seen only if someone is watching for it." They separated at the edge of the camp. Two ravens glided toward the horse corral, while Thomas circled wide, counting heartbeats, waiting for the signal. The outlaws' confidence had made them careless. Only one man stood watch, slumped against a tree with a bottle dangling from his fingers. A night bird called 3 times from the direction of the corral. Thomas froze, counting slowly to 10. Then it happened, the crack of a branch followed by a startled whinny that cascaded into thunderous panic. Horses burst from the corral, hooves pounding earth, wild-eyed and frantic. Men lurched from tents, cursing and shouting. Gunshots split the chaos, warning shots fired skyward, only panicking the animals further. Thomas slipped between shadows, invisible in the confusion. He reached the main tent unseen, pulse hammering in his throat. The canvas back wall yielded to his knife, parting like skin. He slipped inside, rifle first. The tent stood empty but for a camp table strewn with maps and a rumpled cot. No sign of Collingwood. Thomas moved quickly to the table, rifling through papers, looking for this. The voice froze him in place. James Collingwood emerged from a shadowed corner, revolver leveled at Thomas's chest. The crystal hung from a leather cord around his neck, pulsing with unnatural blue light. "You're supposed to be dead," Collingwood said, genuine surprise edging his voice. "I saw your body. You saw what you wanted to see." Thomas kept his voice steady, mind racing for options. Outside, the commotion continued, but it wouldn't distract Collingwood for long. A cold smile spread across the outlaw's face. "Doesn't matter much now, does it? You'll be dead again soon enough." He cocked the hammer. "But first, tell me who you really are. Army? Pinkerton?" "I'm nobody," Thomas answered truthfully. "Just a man who was on the wrong stage at the wrong time." Collingwood studied him, recognition finally dawning. "The banker from Denver. We thought you died in the first volley." "Disappointed?" "Impressed, actually." Collingwood's eyes narrowed. "But your luck's run out. The Cherokee brought you here for this, didn't he?" He fingered the crystal. "Thinks it's some kind of sacred totem." Thomas tensed, shifting his weight imperceptibly to his good leg. "What do you think it is?" "Power." Collingwood's eyes gleamed with fanatical light. "Army scout showed it to me. Said it could locate anything hidden. Water, gold, men on the run." He leaned forward slightly. "Been testing it myself. Works better than any compass or map." "Worth killing for?" "Worth dying for," Collingwood corrected. "Speaking of which," Thomas lunged sideways as the revolver discharged, the bullet tearing through canvas where he'd stood. He crashed into the table, sending maps and papers flying. Collingwood fired again, the shot grazing Thomas's arm with liquid fire. Outside, the chaos had shifted, more gunfire, different shouts. 2 ravens had escalated his diversion. Thomas scrambled behind the cot as Collingwood's third shot embedded itself in the ground. 4 bullets left, Thomas calculated, maybe 5, depending on the model. "You think you're the first to try stealing it?" Collingwood called, circling the cot. "The Cherokee sent others. They're feeding coyotes now." "He didn't send me," Thomas replied, searching frantically for a weapon. His rifle had skidded out of reach. "I came for justice." Collingwood laughed, the sound sharp as broken glass. "Justice? Out here?" Another shot ripped through the cot. "There's only survival. 3 bullets left. Maybe 4. Thomas gripped the tent pole beside him, muscles coiling. When Collingwood stepped into view, Thomas yanked with all his strength. The pole uprooted, canvas collapsing around them both. In the sudden darkness and confusion, Thomas launched himself at the outlaw's silhouette. They collided hard, Collingwood's next shot going wild. Thomas grappled for the gun, his fingers closing around Collingwood's wrist. They rolled across the ground, canvas tangling their limbs, each fighting for control, each fighting. Collingwood was stronger, fueled by desperation and rage. He slammed Thomas's wounded arm against a tent stake, drawing a hoarse cry. The revolver wavered between them, barrel oscillating like a deadly pendulum. "Give my regards to your fellow passengers," Collingwood hissed, forcing the barrel toward Thomas's face. The crystal between them flared suddenly, blindingly bright. Collingwood flinched, his grip slackening for a fraction of a second. Thomas wrenched the gun sideways as it discharged, the bullet grazing Collingwood's temple instead of Thomas's eye. Blood streaming down his face, Collingwood howled in pain and fury. His knee drove into Thomas's wounded leg, stars exploding across Thomas's vision. The outlaw pinned him, hands closing around Thomas's throat. "I'm going to watch the light leave your eyes," Collingwood growled, squeezing, "just like I did with that schoolteacher who couldn't stop crying." Abigail Thornton's face flashed in Thomas's memory. Her kind smile during their shared meals, her excitement about teaching children on the frontier. The darkness at the edges of his vision receded, replaced by cold clarity. His hand closed around a fallen tent stake. With the last of his strength, Thomas drove it upward into Collingwood's side. The outlaw's grip loosened in shock. Thomas rolled, gulping air into burning lungs. Collingwood staggered backward, staring in disbelief at the wood protruding from between his ribs. "You," he began, but never finished. Two ravens materialized from the collapsed canvas, knife flashing once in the moonlight. Collingwood fell without another sound, blood pooling black in the dirt. "We must go," two ravens said urgently, kneeling to cut the crystal free from the outlaw's neck. "Seth Collingwood lives and rallies his men." Thomas struggled to his feet, reclaiming his rifle. "What about your distraction? 4 men dead, the rest scatter in confusion." Two ravens pressed the larger crystal into its smaller companion. They flared together, then dimmed to a steady pulse. But not for long. They fled into the darkness, Thomas's renewed injuries slowing their pace. Behind them, shouts organized. Into pursuit, lanterns bobbing like fireflies through the trees. "We can't outrun them," Thomas gasped, each step sending spikes of agony through his leg. "Not with me slowing you down." Two ravens didn't slow. "We don't need to outrun them, only to reach the sacred ground." He pointed toward a rock formation, silhouetted against the stars. "There." The pursuit grew closer, voices carried on the night wind. Thomas stumbled, nearly falling. Two ravens gripped his arm, supporting him. "Why this place?" Thomas managed between labored breaths. "The stones will show you." They reached the formation as the first bullets whined past them. Two ravens pulled Thomas into a narrow crevice between towering stones. Inside, the passage turned sharply, opening into a small chamber open to the sky above. Two ravens placed both crystals at the center of the space. They pulsed in tandem, their light strengthening, casting strange shadows across ancient petroglyphs carved into the rock walls. "The old ones knew this place," two ravens explained, pressing his palm against one of the carvings. "A doorway between worlds." Thomas stared in disbelief as the carving began to glow beneath the Cherokee's touch. Outside, boots scraped on stone. Seth Collingwood's voice carried clearly. "They're trapped, no way out but through us." "What now?" Thomas whispered, gripping his rifle with bloodied hands. Two ravens turned to him, expressions solemn in the crystal light. "Now you must choose. Stay and fight, almost certainly die, or trust in something your white man's world denies exists." "There's no choice," Thomas replied. "I saw your Cherokee magic work against James Collingwood. I'll trust it again." Something like approval flickered across two ravens' face. He began to chant in his native tongue, his voice rising and falling in cadence with the pulsing light of the stones. The petroglyphs around them brightened, patterns connecting like constellations. The outlaws reached the entrance, shadows falling across the narrow passage. "Come out and die quick," Seth called, his voice thick with grief and rage, "or die slow. When we drag you out." Two Ravens continued his chant, unhurried. The crystal's light intensified, illuminating the chamber like daylight. "Last chance," Seth shouted. Thomas raised his rifle, sighting down the passage. "Whatever you're doing," he whispered to Two Ravens, "might want to hurry it along." The first outlaw appeared in the passage entrance. Thomas fired, the man dropping, with a cry. Another took his place immediately, gun blazing. Thomas ducked behind a stone outcropping as bullets chipped rock around them. Two Ravens never flinched, his chant growing more intense. The crystals now hovered inches above the ground, spinning slowly. The air in the chamber thickened, wavering like heat above desert sand. "Thomas," Two Ravens called, breaking his chant momentarily. "Your hand. Now." Thomas lunged toward the Cherokee, their fingers interlocking just as Seth Collingwood and three of his men burst into the chamber, guns raised. "Kill them!" Seth roared. Gunfire erupted, but the bullets seemed to slow, suspended in the shimmering air. The crystals flared with blinding intensity. Thomas felt himself being pulled apart and compressed simultaneously, every atom of his being, vibrating with impossible energy. The world dissolved into light. When reality reassembled itself, Thomas found himself sprawled on cool grass beneath an unfamiliar sky. Two Ravens knelt beside him, the crystals dark and still in his palms. Of the outlaws there was no sign. "What?" Thomas began, struggling to sit up. "Where are we?" Another time, another place. Two Ravens gazed at the star-filled sky. Constellations, subtly wrong to Thomas's eye. "The doorway brought us where we needed to be." Thomas looked around, disoriented. They sat in a high meadow surrounded by pine forest. In the distance rose mountains he didn't recognize. The Collingwoods? "Left behind," Two Ravens said simply. "The doorway is selective." Thomas's mind reeled, struggling to comprehend. "You can create portals through time and space with those crystals, and you use them to guide hunting parties." For the first time, Two Ravens laughed, a genuine sound of amusement. "My people are practical. Why waste such power on trivial journeys, when finding food ensures survival?" He sobered quickly. "But the greater powers of the heart are used rarely and never lightly. Each passage requires payment." Thomas noticed then that Two Ravens' hand trembled slightly, his normally bronze skin ashen in the starlight. The Cherokee looked suddenly older, weariness etched into every line of his face. "What kind of payment?" "Life energy. Years, perhaps." Two Ravens closed his eyes briefly. "A fair trade for our escape." Thomas fell silent, absorbing this. Finally he asked, "When are we? When did we travel to?" Two Ravens scanned the horizon thoughtfully. "The patterns of stars suggest perhaps 20 summers before your birth, before white men claimed these mountains. Then, we're safe," Two Ravens finished. "For now, the crystals need time to regain their strength before we can return to our proper time." Thomas's wounds chose that moment to remind him of their presence, pain flooding back as the last of the herb's effects faded. He winced, examining the bullet graze on his arm. "You need healing," Two Ravens observed, rising stiffly. "There is a creek nearby. I will gather medicine plants." As the Cherokee moved away, Thomas called after him, "Why did you bring me? You could have escaped alone, saved your strength." Two Ravens paused, turning back with an expression Thomas couldn't quite read in the darkness. "The heart chooses who passes through the doorway," he said finally. "It saw something in you worth preserving." A slight smile. "As did I." Left alone beneath the ancient stars, Thomas contemplated this strange new reality. He had survived a stage robbery, A pursuit across mountains, a battle with notorious killers, and now a journey through time itself. Yet somehow he felt more at peace than he had in years. Whatever came next, whether they returned to their own time or remained here forever, he had found something he thought lost in the bloody aftermath of that stage robbery: purpose. And for now, that was enough. That was enough. Dawn painted the ancient forest in hues Thomas had never witnessed, colors somehow deeper, more vivid than in his own time. Mist clung to the valley below, pierced by treetops like islands in a gossamer sea. Without the scars of human industry, the wilderness stretched unbroken to the horizon. "Your fever broke during the night," two ravens remarked, returning with a handful of berries. "The land here is cleaner. It heals more readily." Thomas accepted the offering gratefully. His wounded leg still ached, but the angry red streaks had receded. The bullet graze on his arm had scabbed cleanly. "How long until the crystals recover?" he asked between mouthfuls of the tart, unfamiliar fruit. Two ravens knelt beside the paired stones, which lay nestled in a small depression of earth. They no longer pulsed, but seemed to absorb the morning sunlight, growing subtly more luminous. 3 days, perhaps 4. The Cherokee's expression grew distant. Time moves differently here, flows like water rather than marching like soldiers. Thomas struggled to his feet, testing his weight on his injured leg. "We should find better shelter. If this is Cherokee territory, won't your ancestors be nearby?" Shadow crossed two ravens' face. "This is dangerous thinking. We cannot interact with what was. The consequences." He shook his head. "The old stories warn of this. Those who meet themselves or their bloodlines risk unraveling their own existence." "Like a man stepping on his own shadow," Thomas murmured, remembering a phrase his grandmother had used. Two ravens looked at him with surprise. Yes, exactly so. They gathered their meager possessions: Thomas's rifle, two ravens' knife, the crystals wrapped carefully in buckskin, and began moving higher into the mountains. Thomas noticed his companion frequently stop to touch trees or examine plants, with something like reverence. "You've never seen this land as it was," Thomas realized aloud, "only in the stories passed down." Two ravens confirmed, his voice unusually soft. "Before the treaties were broken, before the Trail of Tears, my great-grandfather spoke of mountains that touched the sky, forests that had never heard an axe." His fingers traced the bark of an enormous pine. "I believed him. But seeing—" He fell silent, emotion rendering him wordless in a way danger never had. They established a camp in a well-protected hollow near a spring, close enough to water but positioned to spot anyone approaching. As two ravens showed Thomas which plants were edible, which medicinal, Thomas found himself thinking of Abigail Thornton again, the schoolteacher from the stage. "She wanted to teach frontier children about the natural world," he said abruptly. "Said most white teachers only taught them to fear it." Two ravens looked up from the fire he was building. "The woman from your stage?" Thomas nodded. "She carried botanical sketches, beautiful work. She showed them to me during a rest stop." He swallowed hard. "Collingwood burned them before he killed her. Said education was wasted on frontier brats." The Cherokee's hands stilled. "You carry her memory well." "I carry all their memories," Thomas admitted, "but hers. She reminded me of my sister. Same enthusiasm for life." Two ravens placed another stick on the small fire. "My brother died protecting our mother from Collingwood's men. They wanted the heart. He refused. They shot him, but he had hidden it where they couldn't find it." Pride and grief mingled in his voice. "I was hunting when it happened. Returned. To find them gone, and him dying." The confession hung between them, bridging vastly different lives through shared loss. "That's why you waited so long to use the crystal's power," Thomas realized. "You were conserving it for when you found Collingwood. The passage takes much strength, from the heart and from its guardian." Two ravens gazed into the fire. I would not waste it on escape when justice remained unserved. That night, beneath, stars unmarred by coal smoke or city lights, Thomas dreamed of the stage robbery again, but this time he wasn't a passive victim. He moved through the scene like a ghost, witnessing details his conscious mind had suppressed. He saw James Collingwood's face clearly as the mask slipped, not just his features, but the cold calculation in his eyes as he assessed who would live and who would die. He heard fragments of conversation between the brothers. Witness on the cliff saw everything. Take care of them after we finish here. Thomas jerked awake, heart pounding. Two ravens watched him from across the dying embers of their fire, eyes reflecting orange light. You remembered something, the Cherokee observed. There was someone else, Thomas said, the realization crystallizing. Someone on the clifftop above Shadow Canyon, another witness. Two ravens sat forward. You're certain? The brothers discussed it. They were planning to take care of someone after finishing with the stage. Thomas ran a hand through his hair. If we could get back, find this person, they would be dead by now, two ravens said flatly. The Collingwoods are nothing if not thorough, unless they weren't there for the robbery at all. Thomas's mind raced. What if they were just passing by, saw something they shouldn't, then moved on, unaware of its significance? Two ravens considered this possible, but finding such a person would be... A twig snapped in the darkness beyond their camp. Both men froze, instantly alert. Two ravens reached silently for his knife, while Thomas eased the rifle into position. For several heartbeats, nothing moved. Then a low, rumbling growl emerged. In from the shadows, a sound that raised the hair on Thomas's neck. Mountain lion. Two ravens breathed, barely audible. The massive cat materialized at the edge of firelight, larger than any Thomas had seen in his time, its tawny coat gleaming. Like molten gold, it studied them with predatory intelligence, tail lashing slowly. Don't move, two ravens whispered. Don't raise your rifle. It'll attack, Thomas protested under his breath. Not if we show proper respect. The Cherokee slowly, deliberately lowered his knife. This is not an ordinary encounter. The mountain lion padded forward, unnervingly silent despite its size. It circled their camp once, twice, never taking its amber eyes from them. Then, inexplicably, it settled at the edge of the dying fire, forepaws extended like a domestic house cat. What's happening? Thomas whispered, grip still tight on his rifle. The heart draws power from this place. This time, two ravens' voice held wonder. It connects us to what was. He inclined his head toward the mountain lion in a gesture of respect. He is guardian here, as I am guardian of the heart. The great cat blinked slowly, then turned its attention to the crystals, which had begun to pulse faintly in response to its presence. It sniffed them curiously before settling back, watchful but unthreatening. It's protecting us? Thomas asked, incredulously. It's acknowledging us, two ravens corrected. This night at least we share territory. Thomas gradually relaxed his grip on the rifle, though he kept it close. The mountain lion remained through the night, a silent sentinel that occasionally rose to patrol the perimeter of their camp before returning to its position by the fire. By morning, it had vanished, leaving only massive paw prints in the soft earth as evidence of its visit. I've heard stories, Thomas said as they examined the tracks, about mountain lions following travelers, but never this. Two ravens crouched beside the largest print. The old ways are stronger here, the barriers between our world and the spirit world thinner. He placed his hand beside the paw print. His spread fingers barely spanned its width. In my people's stories, the mountain lion brings messages from ancestors. What message did this one bring? The Cherokee stood, brushing dirt from his hands. That we are watched, that our journey has purpose. He glanced at the crystals, which glowed more vibrantly than the previous day, and that our time here may be shorter than I thought. They spent the day exploring their surroundings, always careful to leave minimal signs of their presence. Two ravens showed Thomas how to move silently through the forest, how to read the landscape for water sources and game trails. Despite his injured leg, Thomas proved an apt student. "You adapted quickly to this life," two ravens observed as they tracked a deer to a hidden meadow. "My father was a trapper before he settled in Denver," Thomas explained. "Taught me woodcraft when I was young. I'd forgotten much of it until necessity reminded me." The Cherokee nodded thoughtfully. "Some knowledge sleeps in the blood until needed." As sunset approached, they made their way back toward camp. Two ravens suddenly seized Thomas's arm, pulling him down behind a fallen log. "Listen," he whispered. At first, Thomas heard nothing unusual, just wind through pine needles, a distant hawk's cry. Then he caught it, voices carrying through the trees, human voices. Smoke came from this direction. Probably just a lightning strike. "Check anyway." The voices spoke Cherokee, but Thomas recognized the cadence of conversation. Two ravens' expression had gone rigid. "We must go," he said, voice barely audible. "Now." They retreated through the underbrush, moving with painful slowness to avoid detection. When they finally reached camp, two ravens quickly scattered their fire, erasing all obvious signs of habitation. "Who are they?" Thomas asked, gathering their few possessions. "Hunters from my mother's clan," two ravens replied, his normally steady, hands trembling slightly as he wrapped the crystals. "If they find us—" He didn't finish the thought, but Thomas understood. Their presence here was a dangerous anomaly, a tear in the fabric of time that shouldn't exist. They moved higher into the mountains, following game trails that grew increasingly precarious. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped sharply. Without a fire for warmth or light, they were forced to make camp in a shallow cave, huddled against the increasingly bitter cold. "The crystals," Thomas said through chattering teeth, "they're getting brighter." Indeed, the paired stones now emanated steady blue-white light, illuminating their cramped shelter. Two ravens examined them with concern. "They respond to danger," he explained. "As we are threatened, they draw more power from this place." "That's good, isn't it? They'll recharge faster." Two ravens' expression remained troubled. "Yes, but at a cost. The faster they draw power, the more noticeable we become to this time." "Noticeable how?" "Animals sense it first, like our mountain lion visitor, then those sensitive to spirit energies." Two ravens wrapped his arms around himself, seeking warmth. "If we stay much longer, we risk drawing attention from forces beyond the physical world." Thomas absorbed this ominous warning. "How much longer until we can return?" "Perhaps only one more day," two ravens replied. "But we must find a place of power, a doorway like the one we used before." He gazed out at the moonlit landscape. "There is such a place nearby. I know it from the stories, the Cave of Voices. Can we reach it tomorrow? If we survive the night." Two ravens' tone was matter-of-fact. "The spirits are restless. They know we do not belong." As if confirming his words, an unnatural wind rose outside their shelter, carrying sounds that raised gooseflesh on Thomas's arms. Not quite voices, not quite animal calls, but something in between. The temperature plummeted further, their breath forming crystalline clouds. Thomas moved closer to two ravens, sharing what little body heat remained between them. "Tell me about when we return," he said, desperate to focus on something beyond their immediate peril. "What will you do?" Two ravens remained silent so long that Thomas thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "The world you know is changing, white man. The old ways fade like mist before the sun." He touched the crystals gently. "When we return, I will take the heart deep into the mountains where no white man can find it. Guard it until my death, then pass it to one worthy. And me, The Cherokee's eyes reflected the crystal's otherworldly light. "You walk between worlds now, Thomas Blackwood, neither fully of your old life, nor able to return to it unchanged." His voice softened slightly. "But you carry a burden that must be set down, the weight of those who died while you lived." The strange wind howled around their cave, carrying whispers that almost formed words. Thomas huddled closer to the crystal's light, driven by instinctive fear of what lurked in the darkness beyond. "I don't know if I can set it down," he admitted. "Not until I find justice for them." "Justice," Two Ravens repeated thoughtfully. "Or vengeance? Is there a difference out here?" "Always," the Cherokee replied with quiet certainty. "Vengeance feeds only itself, growing stronger with each bite. Justice—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Justice honors what was, lost without destroying what remains." As the unearthly wind reached a crescendo outside, Thomas found himself thinking of Abigail Thornton again. Not her death, but her life. Her passion for teaching, her botanical sketches, her belief that understanding the natural world was key to thriving within it. "If we survive this," Thomas said, resolve hardening within him, "I'm going to find that other witness, not just for vengeance, but to honor what was lost." Two Ravens nodded slowly. "A worthy purpose." He placed a hand on Thomas's shoulder. "Now sleep if you can. Tomorrow we face the Cave of Voices, and you will need all your strength." As Thomas drifted into uneasy slumber, the crystals pulsed in time with his heartbeat, their light pushing back the darkness filled with ancient hungry spirits that circled their shelter, testing for weakness. In his dreams, Thomas stood once, more amid the wreckage of the stage, but this time the dead rose to speak to him, not in accusation, but in counsel. The elderly Prescott smiled gently. Marshal Foster straightened his bloodied vest with dignity, and Abigail Thornton held out her botanical sketches, pages fluttering in a wind that touched nothing else. "Look closely," she said, her voice carrying the clarity of truth. The answer was always here. Thomas woke with a gasp as the first grey light of dawn crept into their cave. Two Ravens was already awake, the crystals cradled in his palms, their light now strong enough to rival the emerging day. "The Cave of Voices calls," the Cherokee said without preamble. "We must go now while the path remains open." Thomas rose stiffly, his injured leg nearly frozen from the night's bitter cold. But within him burned a new certainty, a purpose beyond mere survival. "I'm ready," he said, and meant it, he said, and meant it, he said. The journey to the Cave of Voices took them across terrain that seemed to resist their very presence. Mist clung to their ankles like spectral hands. The wind changed direction with unnatural precision, always blowing against their progress. Even the rocks beneath their feet seemed to shift subtly, threatening to twist an ankle or send them tumbling down steep slopes. "The land knows we don't belong," Thomas observed, steadying himself against a pine whose needles had bristled at his touch. Two Ravens nodded grimly. "We walk between worlds now, neither fully here nor there." His voice carried a cadence Thomas hadn't heard before, more formal, almost ritualistic. The spirits grow restless. As if confirming his words, a flock of ravens erupted from a nearby stand of trees, circling them thrice before arrowing toward a distant ridge. Two Ravens watched them with narrowed eyes. "They show the way," he said, altering their course to follow the bird's flight path. Thomas's leg burned with each step, the wound reopening slightly despite Two Ravens' healing poultice. Blood seeped through the bandage, leaving a trail no skilled tracker could miss. But behind them came no human pursuers, only the constant sensation of being watched by countless unseen eyes. "You said this Cave of Voices is known in your stories," Thomas said, partly to distract himself from the pain, partly from genuine curiosity. "What kind of voices?" Two ravens walked several paces before answering. Our ancestors speak there, or so it was told to me. A place where the living can seek counsel from those who walked before. And you believe that? The Cherokee's expression hardened slightly. I have seen a crystal transport us backwards through time. I have watched a mountain lion acknowledge our presence instead of attacking. What would you have me doubt, white man? Thomas conceded the point with a nod. His own certainties had eroded with each impossible experience. Who was he to question another man's beliefs when reality itself seemed increasingly fluid? By midday, they reached a series of rocky outcroppings that formed a natural staircase up the mountainside. At the summit waited a dark opening in the cliff face, partially concealed by hanging vines. Ravens perched in perfect stillness on nearby pines, watching their approach with unsettling intelligence. "We have arrived," two ravens announced unnecessarily. Thomas studied the cave entrance with growing apprehension. Unlike their previous shelter, this opening breathed, subtle currents of air flowing in and out with rhythmic consistency. The temperature around it fluctuated perceptibly, warm one moment, cold the next. "What happens inside?" he asked, unable to keep the tension from his voice. Two ravens unwrapped the crystals, which now pulsed with steady blue-white light, significantly brighter than the previous day. "The heart will guide us to another doorway, like the one we used to escape the Collingwoods." He met Thomas's gaze directly. "But first, the voices will speak. They may offer wisdom, they may demand answers. Either way, you must speak truth. And if I don't, then we remain here," two ravens replied simply, "until time itself resolves the contradiction of our presence." Thomas understood the implication clearly enough. "Lead on, then." The cave mouth seemed to inhale as they approached, drawing them forward on a current of air that smelled of sage and something older, minerals undisturbed for millennia. Darkness enveloped them quickly, absolute save for the crystal's glow, which cast their shadows in strange, elongated forms against the rough stone walls. The passage narrowed, forcing them to proceed single file. Two ravens led, the paired crystals, held before him like offerings. Thomas followed close behind, his rifle slung across his back, useless against whatever might await them here. "Listen," two ravens commanded softly. At first, Thomas heard only their footsteps echoing back from unseen depths. Then gradually, like water seeping through stone, came sounds that defied simple description. Not quite voices, not quite wind, but something between. They seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, vibrating through the air with physical presence. Two ravens stopped abruptly, raising the crystals higher. The narrow passage had opened into a circular chamber with a domed ceiling so high that the crystal's light couldn't reach it. At the chamber's center stood a natural column of stone, weathered into a form that uncomfortably resembled a human figure with outstretched arms. "The Watcher," two ravens explained, approaching the column with evident reverence, "guardian of the threshold." The not-quite voices intensified, becoming more distinct. Thomas realized with a chill that they spoke in multiple languages, Cherokee, predominant among them, but others too, including English. Fragments reached him, tantalizing in their half-formed meanings. Blood spilled upon. The wheel turns ever. Witnesses to shadow and light. Two ravens placed the crystals at the base of the stone column. Their light spiraled upward, illuminating ancient pictographs carved into the rock. Hunters, spirit beings, celestial symbols that Thomas recognized from his limited knowledge of native astronomy. "We seek passage." Two ravens addressed the column, formally. "I am Gola, guardian of the heart of the mountain. With me stands Thomas Blackwood, witness to great injustice. We do not belong in this time. We ask safe return to our own." The chamber fell into profound silence. Even the strange sounds from the walls ceased. Thomas felt the air pressure change, his ears popping painfully. The crystals dimmed momentarily, then flared with blinding intensity. A voice spoke, a single voice now, deep and resonant, seeming to emerge from the stone column itself. It spoke in Cherokee, words Thomas couldn't understand, but whose meaning vibrated through him nonetheless. 2. Ravens listened intently, occasionally nodding. His expression shifted from concentration to surprise, then to something approaching awe. When the voice finally fell silent, he turned to Thomas with troubled eyes. "What did it say?" Thomas asked. "It knows why we came, what we seek." 2 ravens. Voice had grown hoarse. "It offers passage, but demands truth first." "Truth about what?" "About why you were spared when others died." 2 ravens gestured toward the column. "It says your survival was not accident or chance. That you carry a burden greater than justice for the stage passengers." Thomas approached the column cautiously. "I don't understand." "Speak your truth to the stone," 2 ravens instructed. "All of it. Hold nothing back." Feeling foolish yet compelled, Thomas placed his palm against the cold surface of the stone figure. Immediately warmth spread up his arm, and the voices in the walls resumed their whispered chorus. "I survived because I was lucky," he began uncertainly. "The first bullet only grazed me. I fell. They thought I was dead. That's all." The stone remained cold and unyielding beneath his hand. The voices grew louder, more insistent. "That's all," Thomas repeated, more firmly this time. 2 ravens shook his head. "The watcher knows when truth is withheld. Speak it, or we remain here forever." Thomas closed his eyes, frustration warring with fear. What truth was he supposed to offer to an ancient stone in a cave outside of time? What did it want from him? Then, unbidden, Abigail Thornton's dream voice whispered in his memory. The answer was always here. Understanding bloomed like blood. In water, Thomas opened his eyes, meeting the featureless face of the stone column. "I shouldn't have been on that stage at all," he said quietly. "I took another man's place, a man who should have died instead of those innocent people." The voices stilled, listening. 2 ravens remained motionless, watching Thomas with new intensity. "His name was William Hargrove," Thomas continued, the confession spilling from him now. "A business rival. We were both supposed to attend a meeting in Silver City. The stage only had 1 seat left. He swallowed hard. "I bribed the station manager to give me Hargrove's reserved seat, told him Hargrove had cancelled, left him stranded in Fort Griffin. The stone warmed beneath his palm as he spoke, encouraging further truth. "It was just business," Thomas said, the justification sounding hollow even to his own ears. "Banking is competitive. Hargrove would have done the same to me. But then the stage was attacked, and all those people died, and I lived, and it should have been Hargrove in that seat, not me. Not them." The weight of guilt he'd carried since the robbery, guilt he hadn't fully acknowledged even to himself, crashed over him like a physical wave. His legs buckled, bringing him to his knees before the stone column. "I've been telling myself I want justice for them," he whispered. "But maybe I've just been trying to atone for my own selfishness. If I hadn't taken that seat." The voices surged around them, a tide of sound that vibrated through stone and air and bone. The crystals pulsed in sympathy, their light washing the chamber in rhythmic illumination. 2 ravens knelt beside Thomas, placing a steadying hand on his shoulder. "The truth is seen," the Cherokee translated as the stone column began to speak again. "The path is opened." At the far side of the chamber, a section of wall dissolved into shimmering light, not the blinding flash of their previous transport, but a gentler radiance that revealed a tunnel stretching away into darkness. "Come," 2 ravens said, helping Thomas to his feet. "We must move quickly. The doorway will not remain open long." Thomas wiped moisture from his face, tears he hadn't realized he'd shed. The confession had left him feeling hollowed out, yet somehow lighter, as if some festering wound had finally been lanced. Two ravens retrieved the crystals, which now glowed steadily without their earlier pulsing urgency. As they approached the shimmering passage, the Cherokee paused, turning back to the stone column with a formal bow. "There is one more thing," he said to Thomas. "The Watcher spoke of your burden. It said you carry knowledge that must be delivered, or the wheel of time, and cannot continue its proper turn." "What knowledge?" "That remains to be discovered," two ravens replied. "But it concerns the other witness you remembered, the one who observed the stage robbery from the cliffs." They stepped into the luminous passage together. Unlike their previous transition, this journey felt gentle, almost peaceful. Thomas experienced the sensation of walking through countless layers of gauzy fabric, each one representing a year, a decade, a generation. Whispers accompanied them, but these were not the unsettling voices of the cave. Rather, they sounded like fragments of everyday conversation, laughter, singing, the mundane music of human existence across time. The passage curved gradually upward, the light around them shifting from ethereal blue to the warm gold of late afternoon sunlight. Thomas felt the air change, becoming drier, carrying the familiar scents of sage and juniper that he associated with his own time. "We're going back," he said with certainty. Two ravens nodded, his features illuminated by the fading light of the crystals. "The heart returns us to when we left. But," he hesitated, "I sense we are not returning to where we left." Before Thomas could question this, the passage ended abruptly. They stepped out into blinding sunlight, momentarily disoriented by the transition. As Thomas's vision cleared, he found himself standing not in the mountain fortress where they had escaped the Collingwood gang, but on the rim of a familiar canyon, Shadow Canyon, the site of the stage robbery. "Why here?" he gasped, recognizing the twisted juniper tree where the stage had rounded the final bend before the ambush. Two ravens studied the crystals, which had gone dormant in his palms. "The heart guided us to where your truth began, where your burden must be lifted." He surveyed the canyon with narrowed eyes. "And perhaps where we will find answers about the other witness." Thomas moved cautiously to the canyon's edge. Below, no sign remained of the robbery, no wreckage, no bodies. Either they had arrived before it happened, or more likely weeks had passed and all evidence had been removed. "What day is it?" he wondered aloud. "How long have we been gone?" Two ravens pointed to a plume of dust on the horizon. "A rider approaching. At speed. Perhaps we will soon discover." They retreated from the exposed rim to the shelter of a boulder field, watching as the rider drew nearer. Thomas gripped his rifle, uncertain whether to expect friend or foe. After their experiences, caution seemed the wisest course. The rider, a weathered man in dusty cavalry blues, reined in his horse almost directly below their position. He dismounted stiffly, leading the animal to a sparse patch of grass. Then, with the practiced movements of someone following routine, he extracted a spyglass from his saddlebags and trained it on the canyon road. "He watches the stage route," two ravens observed quietly. "Army patrol?" Thomas suggested. The Cherokee shook his head. "No insignia, no companion, and he conceals himself too carefully." Indeed, the man positioned himself in the shadow of an overhang, minimizing his visibility from the road below. He settled in with the patience of someone prepared for a long wait. "He's looking for someone," Thomas realized. "Or something." Two Ravens' expression sharpened with sudden intuition. "Or he's watching for a robbery that has already happened." Understanding hit Thomas like a physical blow. "The witness," he breathed. "He's the witness from the clifftop." The Cherokee nodded slowly. "It seems the heart has guided us well." Thomas studied the man with new intensity. But why would he return to the scene weeks later? Perhaps, Two Ravens suggested, for the same reason you needed to return, to make peace with what happened here. Thomas made his decision quickly. I'm going down there. Carefully, Two Ravens cautioned. We do not know whose side he serves. Thomas checked his rifle, then began picking his way down the rocky slope, using natural cover where possible. Two Ravens followed like a shadow, moving with such quiet grace that Thomas sometimes forgot he was there, until a displaced pebble or bent grass blade revealed his passage. They were within 20 yards of the stranger when the man sensed their approach. He whirled, drawing a revolver with practiced speed. That's far enough, he called, his voice carrying the distinctive accent of the Texas hill country. Show yourselves, nice and easy. Thomas stepped into view, rifle pointed at the ground, but ready. Just passing through, he said, attempting to sound casual despite his pounding heart. Didn't mean to startle you. The stranger's eyes narrowed, taking in Thomas's appearance. The mismatched clothes taken from the dead outlaw, the healing wound on his leg, the haggard look of a man who had journeyed beyond normal human experience. You look familiar, the man said slowly, revolver unwavering. Have we met before? Thomas chose his next words with extreme care. Depends. Were you watching from these cliffs 3 weeks ago when the Collingwood gang robbed the Silver City stage? The man's face went pale beneath his tan. The revolver trembled slightly, then steadied. You're dead, he whispered. I saw them kill everyone, every last passenger. Not quite everyone, Thomas replied quietly. The stranger's expression shifted, through disbelief, suspicion, and finally cautious hope. Dear God, he breathed. You're the banker from Denver, Thomas Blackwood. Thomas nodded slowly. And you are? The man holstered his weapon with a shaking hand. Special Agent Samuel Reeves, Pinkerton Detective Agency. He swallowed hard, eyes never leaving Thomas's face. I've been hunting the Collingwood gang for 8 months. Witnessed the robbery but couldn't intervene, was outnumbered 6-1. So you've been coming back, Thomas guessed. Watching for them to return to the scene? Reeves nodded grimly. Outlaws are superstitious. Sometimes they circle back, especially when something goes wrong. His gaze sharpened. And something did go wrong, didn't it? You survived. I did, Thomas confirmed. And I've brought news you'll want to hear. Two ravens emerged silently from the rocks, causing Reeves to tense momentarily before recognition dawned. The Cherokee tracker, he said with evident respect. I've heard of you. They say you can find anything that leaves a trace on this earth. Two Ravens inclined his head slightly, accepting the acknowledgement without comment. We have much to discuss, Agent Reeves, Thomas said, glancing at the descending sun, and I believe our stories will be of great interest to each other. As the 3 men gathered around Reeves's small fire that evening, Thomas felt the strange sensation of a circle closing, or perhaps a spiral continuing its natural curve. The burden he had carried since the stage robbery hadn't vanished, but it had transformed into something else, something with purpose and direction. He thought of Abigail Thornton's dream words again. The answer was always here. Perhaps she hadn't been referring to the stage robbery at all, but to this moment, this unlikely convergence of a surviving witness, a Pinkerton detective, and a Cherokee guardian with mysterious powers. Perhaps, Thomas reflected as he prepared, to share his incredible journey, justice for the dead might finally be within reach. Agent Reeves listened without interruption as Thomas recounted his impossible tale, the survival, the pursuit, Two Ravens' intervention, and their journey through time itself. Only when Thomas described killing James Collingwood did the Pinkerton agent show visible emotion, a flicker of satisfaction crossing his weathered features. You say the younger brother, Seth, is still alive? Reeves asked when Thomas finished, his Texas drawl sharpening with interest. Unless something happened after we escaped through the doorway, Thomas confirmed. He was rallying the remaining men when we fled. Reeves extracted a leather-bound notebook from his coat, thumbing through dog-eared pages covered with meticulously detailed notes. "The Collingwood operation is bigger than you know," he said grimly. "The stage robberies are just the surface. Beneath it lies a network of corruption stretching from Texas to Montana territory." "What kind of corruption?" Thomas asked. "Army supply contracts, land speculation ahead of the railroad, ghost payrolls for Indian reservations." Reeves's mouth tightened, the skin around his eyes crinkling with disgust. "The brothers have judges and Indian agents on their payroll, even a territorial governor, if my sources are correct." Two ravens, who had remained silent throughout Thomas's narrative, stirred at this. "The heart," he said quietly. "They believe it will lead them to more power." Reeves glanced at the paired crystals resting in their buckskin wrapping. "I've heard rumors," he admitted, "whispers among the gang's associates about Collingwood finding some kind of Indian magic. Most dismissed it as superstition." His eyes narrowed. "Until the gang started finding gold deposits no survey had detected, until they began moving through Apache territory without losing a single man." Thomas and two ravens exchanged looks. "The heart shows paths," the Cherokee confirmed, his voice taking on that formal cadence Thomas had come to recognize when he spoke of sacred matters. "It reveals what is hidden in the hands of men like the Collingwoods. It's a weapon." Thomas finished, just as you said. Reeves closed his notebook with a decisive snap. "Then our objectives align. I need to dismantle the Collingwood operation. You need justice for the stage victims. And you," he nodded to two ravens, "need to reclaim your sacred object." "What do you propose?" Thomas asked. "Seth Collingwood believes you both dead," Reeves said, outlining his thoughts with the precision of a man accustomed to building cases methodically. "He doesn't know I witnessed the robbery. That gives us 3 ghosts to haunt him with, 3 angles he won't be expecting." Two ravens nodded slowly. "The surviving gang will have retreated to their main stronghold. With James dead, Seth will move to secure his position." "Exactly," Reeves agreed. "According to my intelligence, that stronghold is a former mission near Cottonwood Creek. 30 men, well armed, with scouts positioned throughout the surrounding territory." He smiled thinly. "But no scout watches for the dead." As night settled, fully around them, they refined their plan. Reeves would return to the nearest Pinkerton office in Santa Fe, organizing a force of agents to surround the mission once they had confirmed Seth's presence. Two ravens would use his tracking skills to get Thomas and himself inside undetected. And Thomas would become the ghost that Seth Collingwood feared most. "Dawn comes early," Reeves said finally, banking their small fire. "We should rest while we can." As the Pinkerton agent settled into his bedroll, Thomas moved to the canyon's edge, staring down at the empty road where the stage had been ambushed. The moon cast the scene in silver light, transforming the violent memory into something almost peaceful. Two ravens joined him silently, the crystals now rewrapped and secured in his medicine pouch. "In the cave," Thomas said quietly, "I told the truth about taking another man's place on the stage, but I didn't tell you everything." The Cherokee waited, patient as the stones beneath their feet. "William Hargrove wasn't just a business rival," Thomas continued. "He was courting Abigail Thornton, the school teacher. They had been corresponding for months. He was traveling to Silver City to propose marriage." Understanding dawned in two Ravens's eyes. She was on that stage because she was going to her new teaching position, yes, but also to meet Hargrove. Thomas's voice grew thick. "When I took his seat, I didn't just cheat a rival. I sentenced 2 people in love to separation. And then she died, never knowing why he hadn't come. Two Ravens was silent for a long moment. Does Hargrove know what happened to her? The newspapers reported all the victims' names, Thomas replied. He must know. Then there is another ghost. In this story, Two Ravens observed, another wound that needs healing. Thomas nodded, the weight of this truth settling beside the others he carried. If we survive what's coming, I'll find him. Tell him everything. Good, Two Ravens said simply. Truth has power. It can destroy, but it can also heal. They retired to their separate bedrolls, but sleep eluded Thomas. His mind raced with images, the stage robbery, the cave of voices, the mountain lions, Amber Eyes, Abigail Thornton's dream presence. When he finally drifted off near dawn, his last conscious thought was that he had traveled through time itself. Yet somehow, the most impossible journey still lay ahead. Morning arrived with Reeves, already awake, brewing coffee over a fresh fire. The Pinkerton agent's efficiency reminded Thomas of Two Ravens, a man who wasted no motion, no resource. 4 days' ride to Santa Fe, Reeves said, passing Thomas a tin cup of bitter coffee. Another 3 to Cottonwood Creek. If Seth hasn't moved the operation, we could bring this to a head within 2 weeks. Thomas sipped the scalding liquid, grateful for its clarifying heat. And if he has moved, then we track him. Two Ravens answered from behind them, returning from his morning reconnaissance. The heart will find its larger piece regardless of distance. Reeves's gaze lingered on the Cherokee's medicine pouch where the crystals rested. These stones, he said carefully, after this is over. They return to my people, Two Ravens interrupted firmly, where they have rested for generations, where they belong. The Pinkerton agent held up his hands in placation. Of course. I merely wonder what would happen if the government learned of their existence. The same thing that always happens, Two Ravens replied, his voice cold as mountain streams. They would take what is not theirs to take. They would use what they do not understand. And in the end, they would destroy what they cannot control. Thomas intervened before tension could escalate. The crystals have shown us only what we needed to see, he said diplomatically. Justice for the stage victims, the Collingwood conspiracy. Perhaps that's all they're meant to reveal. That Reeves accepted this with a nod, though Thomas suspected the matter wasn't fully settled in the agent's mind. Pinkerton men were known for their tenacity. It made them effective investigators and dangerous enemies. They broke camp efficiently, Reeves mounting his horse while Thomas and Two Ravens prepared to make their way to the nearest settlement, where they could acquire supplies and mounts of their own. 8 days, Reeves confirmed as he gathered his reins. I'll meet you at Broken Spoke Creek with as many men as I can muster. Watch for the signal. 3 shots, pause, then 2 more. Thomas extended his hand, which Reeves shook firmly. Then Agent, as the Pinkerton rode away, Thomas turned to Two Ravens with an unspoken question. The Cherokee's expression remained neutral, but his eyes had grown watchful. You don't trust him, Thomas observed. I trust his purpose, Two Ravens replied carefully. But men like him serve many masters, the agency, the government, his own ambition. He adjusted the medicine pouch at his waist. We would be wise to prepare for betrayal. He wants Seth Collingwood as badly as we do, Thomas argued. Yes, Two Ravens agreed. But after, when the shooting stops and choices must be made, he shook his head slightly. White men's justice and Cherokee justice rarely walk the same path. They set out toward the settlement of Copper Springs, ironically, the same town Thomas had been attempting to reach after surviving the robbery. The journey would take a full day on foot, across terrain that appeared largely unchanged by their extraordinary adventures. As they walked, Thomas found himself reflecting on how profoundly he had transformed since that blood-soaked day in Shadow Canyon. The banker from Denver, concerned with profit margins and business rivalries, seemed like a stranger now, a half-remembered dream from another life. "You are quieter than usual," two ravens observed as they paused to rest near midday. "Just thinking about who I was before all this," Thomas replied. "I barely recognize that man now." The Cherokee nodded understanding. "The white man's world teaches that identity is fixed. Banker, soldier, chief, Indian, my people know different. A man can be many things throughout his life, sometimes many things at once." "And what am I now?" Thomas wondered aloud. "That," two ravens said with surprising gentleness, "is for you alone to decide." They continued their journey as afternoon shadows lengthened across the landscape. When Copper Springs finally appeared on the horizon, a collection of wooden buildings clustered around a central street, Thomas felt an unexpected trepidation. "Wait," he said, pulling two ravens into the shelter of a juniper grove. "I just realized the authorities might have identified me as one of the stage victims. If someone recognizes me—" Two ravens considered this. "You wear different clothes. Your beard has grown. The wound has changed how you move." He studied Thomas critically. "But yes, caution is wise. I will enter town alone, acquire what we need." "They may not welcome a Cherokee," Thomas pointed out. A ghost of a smile touched two ravens' lips. "Then I will be Joseph Williams, educated at the Presbyterian mission." His posture and expression shifted subtly, taking on the slightly stiff demeanor of an assimilated native. "I find white men see what they expect to see." Thomas nodded, impressed by the transformation. "I'll wait here until nightfall, then meet you at the livery stable at the edge of town." Two ravens departed with a portion of the money Reeves had provided them. Thomas settled beneath a broad juniper to wait, his rifle across his knees. The afternoon quiet lulled him into a meditative state, his mind drifting between past and present, reality and dream. A sound pulled him back to alertness, the snap of a twig behind him. Thomas whirled, rifle raised, to find himself facing a young boy of perhaps 10 years, frozen in mid-step with wide eyes. "Don't shoot, mister," the child gasped, freckles standing out against his suddenly pale face. Thomas lowered his weapon immediately. "Sorry, son, you startled me." The boy remained, poised to flee, studying Thomas with the direct curiosity of youth. "You're him, ain't you?" he asked suddenly. "The ghost of Shadow Canyon." Thomas's blood chilled. "What did you say?" "The ghost," the boy repeated matter-of-factly. "Pa says one of the passengers from the stage robbery haunts the canyon now. Says that's why the Collingwood gang won't come back this way no more." Almost against his will, Thomas found himself asking, "And who does your pa say this ghost might be?" "The banker from Denver," the boy replied promptly. "Thomas Blackwood. They buried him and the others over yonder hill." He pointed toward a small rise visible from their position. "Pa helped dig the graves. Said Mr. Blackwood was all shot up worse than the others. Said it wasn't right, what the Collingwoods did." Thomas struggled to maintain his composure. "Your Pa sounds like a good man." The boy nodded vigorously. "He's the blacksmith in town. Name's Carter, mine's Jasper." He squinted at Thomas suspiciously. "You still ain't said if you're the ghost or not." A plan formed in Thomas's mind, dangerous, perhaps foolish, but with potential. "What if I told you I am?" Jasper's eyes widened further. "For real? You don't look very ghostly." "Ghosts don't always appear as you'd expect," Thomas said, deciding to play along. "Sometimes we look just like regular folks. Why are you haunting the canyon?" The boy asked, fear giving way to fascination. "Justice," Thomas replied simply. "I can't rest until the Collingwoods answer for what they did." Jasper nodded solemnly. "That makes sense. Pa says the same thing about justice." He hesitated, then added, "Everyone knows James Collingwood is dead. Someone killed him up in Cherokee territory. Seth's gone crazy looking for whoever did it." "Is that so?" Thomas feigned surprise. "And where might Seth be looking?" "All over," Jasper replied vaguely. Then, with the unintentional honesty of children, he added, Pa says he's holed up at the old San Xavier mission with what's left of his gang. Says Seth's scared of something worse than the law. Thomas's pulse quickened. The boy had just confirmed Reeves's intelligence about the Cottonwood Creek location. Your pa seems to know a lot about the Collingwoods. Everyone does, Jasper said, with a shrug. They own half the county. Got the sheriff in their pocket too. Jasper! A man's voice called from the direction of town. And where are you, boy? The child glanced over his shoulder nervously. That's Pa. I gotta go. He backed away a few steps, then paused. If you really are a ghost, you should haunt Seth Collingwood, make him confess what he did. That's exactly what I intend to do, Thomas said quietly. Jasper turned to leave, then hesitated once more. Mr. Ghost? One more thing, they didn't just bury you at that cemetery. He pointed toward the distant rise again. All the stage passengers are there, even that nice schoolteacher lady who gave me a peppermint candy at the station. Thomas's throat tightened painfully. Thank you, Jasper, for telling me. The boy vanished into the junipers, leaving Thomas alone with a storm of emotions. Abigail Thornton had given a child candy at the station. Such a small detail, such a human gesture. Another piece of her life preserved in memory. Another reason. Her death demanded justice. As dusk gathered, Thomas made his decision. Before meeting two ravens at the livery stable, he would visit the small cemetery on the hill. He needed to see the graves, needed to confront the physical reality of what had been lost. The sun had nearly set when he reached the fenced enclosure. 6 fresh markers stood in a neat row, names carved with simple dignity into wooden crosses. Thomas moved from one to another, paying his respects to the Prescotts, to Marshall Foster, to the stage driver whose name he'd never learned. When he reached Abigail Thornton's grave, he knelt in the soft earth. No body lay beneath the marker. His body, according to what everyone believed. The irony might have been amusing under different circumstances. I'm sorry, he whispered, fingers tracing the rough-carved letters of her name. For everything. He extracted a small botanical sketch from his coat pocket, one he'd salvaged from the stage wreckage after the gang had left. It showed a desert, primrose, rendered with delicate precision. Abigail had been working on it during their journey, occasionally asking him questions about Denver's gardens. He placed it gently at the base of her marker, weighted with a small stone. I'll make it. Right, he promised. Somehow. As he rose to leave, a flicker of movement caught his eye, a shadow detaching from the larger darkness beyond the cemetery fence. Thomas froze, hand moving instinctively to his rifle. I wondered if you might come here, a familiar voice said. Softly, 2 ravens emerged from the shadows, leading 2 horses by their reins. The blacksmith's son told a fascinating story when he returned to town, the Cherokee continued. About meeting a ghost beneath the junipers. Thomas relaxed slightly. News travels fast. In small towns, faster than lightning. 2 ravens handed him the reins to one of the horses, a sturdy pinto with an intelligent eye. By morning, everyone, in 3 counties, will have heard that Thomas Blackwood's ghost walks again. Good, Thomas said with sudden conviction. Let them talk. Let the word spread to Seth Collingwood. His gaze returned to the row of graves, lives cut short by violence. And greed. When he looked back at 2 ravens, a new resolve had hardened within him. It's time for the dead to speak. Time for the dead to speak. Time for the... They rode through the night, leaving Copper Springs and its whispered ghost stories far behind. Thomas's pinto proved as sure-footed as it looked, navigating the treacherous mountain paths with calm confidence. 2 ravens led them along routes no white man would have found, game trails too subtle for untrained eyes, dry creek beds that appeared impassable until you discovered the hidden turn. Dawn found them high in the foothills that separated Shadow Canyon from Cottonwood Creek, making camp in a sheltered hollow where two massive boulders formed a natural windbreak. As Thomas unsaddled his mount, he noticed the crystals in Two Ravens' pouch had begun pulsing again with that now familiar blue-white light. "We draw closer to the larger piece," the Cherokee confirmed, noticing Thomas's gaze. "Seth Collingwood keeps it with him as his brother did. How far to the mission? 2 days' ride if we follow regular trails." Two Ravens gestured toward the mountains. "1 day if we take paths that don't exist on white men's maps." Thomas nodded his understanding. "And Reeves will arrive after us, as planned." Two Ravens' expression remained neutral, but Thomas had learned to read the subtle signs of the Cherokee's concern, the slight tension around his eyes, the way his fingers occasionally brushed the medicine pouch. If he keeps his word. They rested through the heat of the day, preserving their strength for the journey ahead. Thomas found himself unable to sleep, instead watching the play of light and shadow across the canyon walls, imagining the stories they could tell if stone could speak. "You should rest," Two Ravens observed, returning from scouting the surrounding area. "The mission will require all our strength." "I keep thinking about what we're walking into," Thomas admitted. 30 armed men against the two of us. Even with Reeves and his agents, those aren't favorable odds. Two Ravens settled beside him, extracting a small bundle of herbs from his pack. He crushed them between his fingers, releasing a sharp, clean scent that cleared the mind. "Numbers matter less than belief," he said, offering Thomas a pinch of the herbs. "The Collingwood gang believes in guns, in violence, in fear. These are powerful forces." He nodded toward the medicine pouch. "But older forces exist. Belief in justice, in retribution, in the power of the dead to reach from beyond." "You think Seth Collingwood will believe I'm actually a ghost?" Thomas asked skeptically. "I think," Two Ravens replied carefully, "that men who have killed as many as Seth Collingwood are haunted already. You will simply give those hauntings a face." That evening, they resumed their journey, following a route that seemed to materialize beneath their horses' hooves as they rode. Two Ravens consulted the crystals occasionally, adjusting their course in response to the strengthening pulses of light. "The heart knows its missing piece," he explained. "It pulls us toward completion." As midnight approached, they crested a ridge that offered their first view of Cottonwood Creek and the abandoned mission that now served as the Collingwood gang's stronghold. The stone building rose from the valley floor like a dark sentinel, its bell tower silhouetted against the star-filled sky. Lamplight gleamed from several windows, and the glow of multiple campfires surrounded the structure. "More men than Reeves estimated," Thomas observed grimly, "counting at least a dozen distinct fires. They've reinforced their numbers." Two Ravens studied the scene with narrowed eyes. "Seth prepares for war," he agreed. "He knows something comes for him." They made camp well back from the ridge, where no sentry could spot their fire. As they ate a cold meal of jerky and hardtack, Two Ravens outlined his plan, a plan that relied as much on superstition and fear as on physical confrontation. "The larger crystal is kept in the bell tower," he said, the smaller stones in his palm pulsing in that direction. "Seth Collingwood sleeps in what was once the priest's quarters here." He sketched a rough map in the dirt. "Guards patrol the perimeter, but they watch for living threats approaching from the ground. Not for ghosts descending from above," Thomas concluded, understanding dawning. The Cherokee nodded. "There is a way down from the cliffs behind the mission. Difficult, dangerous, but possible with proper preparation." His finger traced a faint line along the map, used by the Apache in raids against the Spanish priests many years ago. Thomas studied the proposed route with growing apprehension. "You've done this before." "Once," Two Ravens admitted, "when tracking James Collingwood before finding you. I saw the guard positions, the routines. I found where the heart was kept." A shadow crossed his features. but I could not retrieve it alone. The risk was too great, and now we have something James Collingwood never expected." Two ravens met Thomas's gaze steadily. A dead man walking. They spent the following day observing the mission, noting guard changes and patrol patterns. The gang maintained discipline, but showed signs of strain. Raised voices occasionally carried across the valley, and twice they witnessed what appeared to be punishment details, men forced to stand in the brutal sun for hours. "Seth rules through fear," two ravens observed. "Not loyalty, as his brother did. It makes them dangerous but unstable." As dusk approached, they prepared for the night's infiltration. Two ravens provided Thomas with a mixture of black clay and ash to darken his face and hands. Their clothing, already dark, would blend with the shadows they would use for cover. "The smaller crystals will guide us to the larger piece," two ravens explained, securing his medicine pouch. "But once inside, we must work quickly. When Seth Collingwood realizes what happens, he will not hesitate to kill anyone in his path, his own men included." Thomas checked his rifle one final time, then tucked his revolver into his belt. "And Reeves? Still no sign?" "Not yet." Two ravens' expression revealed nothing. "But the Pinkerton man knows his business. He will come." They left their horses secured in a hidden arroyo, approaching the mission on foot as full darkness descended. The cliff face behind the old stone building loomed before them, a sheer wall of rock that appeared unclimbable in the moonlight. "There," two ravens whispered, indicating a nearly invisible series of handholds worn into the stone. A patchy path. The climb tested every limit of Thomas's endurance. His wounded leg, though largely healed, protested each time he forced it to support his weight. Loose rock crumbled beneath his fingers more than once, sending tiny avalanches of debris skittering down the cliff face. Each time they froze, waiting in suspended agony for shouts of alarm that never came. Two ravens moved above him with unnerving grace, finding purchase where none seemed to exist. Occasionally he would reach down, guiding Thomas's hand to a secure hold invisible in the darkness. When they finally reached the narrow ledge that ran behind the mission's bell tower, Thomas's arms trembled with exhaustion. Sweat had carved pale tracks through the dark mixture on his face, despite the night's chill. "Rest," two ravens instructed softly. "Gather your strength." Thomas leaned against the cool stone of the mission wall, feeling its ancient solidity against his back. From their position, they could hear voices from within, drunken laughter, arguments over card games, the restless sounds of men living too close together for too long. Two ravens extracted the crystals from his pouch. They pulsed with steady rhythm now, the blue-white light so bright he was forced to shield it with his cupped hands. "The heart knows we are near," he whispered. "It calls to its missing piece." A narrow window, little more than an archer's slot, pierced the wall beside them. Two ravens peered through it cautiously, then gestured for Thomas to look. Inside was what had once been the mission's sanctuary, now transformed into the gang's main gathering space. Tables had been arranged haphazardly, crowded with men drinking and gambling. Weapons lay within easy reach, rifles stacked against walls, revolvers on belts. At the center of the room, a large man with flame-red hair paced restlessly, pausing occasionally to study something in his hand that caught the lamplight with unnatural brilliance. "Seth Collingwood," Thomas whispered, recognizing him from the confrontation at the outlaw camp. Two ravens nodded. "And the heart. He keeps it close now, not in the tower as before." They watched as Seth barked orders at his men, his voice carrying the unmistakable edge of barely controlled panic. The gang members responded with resentful obedience, fear evident in their quick movements and downcast eyes. "He unravels," two ravens observed. "Since his brother's death, the heart works on him in ways he does not understand." "Works on him?" Thomas questioned. "The heart reveals truth to those who hold it," the Cherokee explained. "For those with darkness inside, those truths can destroy." He watched Seth's agitated movements with cold satisfaction. He sees the faces of those he has killed, hears their voices when he tries to sleep. The heart makes sure of it. A plan began forming in Thomas's mind, one more dangerous than their original approach, but potentially more effective. "If he's already haunted by his victims," he said, slowly, then seeing one in the flesh. Two ravens seemed to read his thoughts. "You would confront him directly? Alone?" "Not alone," Thomas corrected, a grim smile forming beneath his darkened features. "With every passenger from that stage beside me." The Cherokee studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "The path that frightens us most is often the one we must take." He reached into his medicine pouch, extracting not the crystals but a small bundle of herbs, different from any Thomas had seen before. "Chew these. They will keep your mind clear when fear would cloud it." Thomas accepted the offering, the bitter taste flooding his mouth with surprising warmth that spread throughout his body. Almost immediately, his fatigue receded, replaced by crystalline clarity of thought. "Now," two ravens continued, "we must separate. You will create the ghost that Seth Collingwood fears. I will retrieve the heart when his attention fixes on you." He gripped Thomas's shoulder firmly. "If I do not return, take the smaller crystals to my people. Ask for the one called Singing Brook. She will know what must be done." Thomas nodded, understanding the gravity of the trust being placed in him. "And if things go wrong for me, they will not," two ravens said with quiet certainty. "The spirits favor you, Thomas Blackwood. They have since the moment you survived when others died." They parted ways at the window, two ravens continuing along the narrow ledge toward the bell tower, while Thomas located a partially collapsed section of wall that would allow him access to what had once been the mission's living quarters. As he eased himself through the crumbling stonework, Thomas felt a strange calmness descend, not the artificial stillness of two ravens' herbs, but something deeper. For the first time since the stage robbery, he moved with complete certainty of purpose. Whether he lived or died in the next hour seemed suddenly less important than fulfilling the obligation he carried to those who hadn't survived. He navigated the dark corridors silently, guided by the sounds of Seth Collingwood's voice growing steadily louder. The former priest's quarters connected to the main sanctuary through a heavy wooden door, now partially ajar. Thomas positioned himself in the shadows beside it, listening as Seth continued his increasingly erratic address to his men. "And they don't care what you heard," the outlaw leader was shouting. "My brother was killed by men, not spirits, flesh and blood that can bleed just like anyone else." "But Jenkins swears he saw," one of the gang members began. "Jenkins is a superstitious fool," Seth cut him off. "There ain't no such thing as ghosts." Thomas chose that moment to step through the doorway. "Are you certain about that, Seth Collingwood?" he asked, his voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent room. Every head turned, every face registered shock, but none more profoundly than Seth's. The outlaw leader went deathly pale, the larger crystal slipping from his nerveless fingers to dangle from its leather cord around his neck. "Blackwood," he whispered, the name escaping like air from a punctured lung. "You're dead. We killed you." "Yes," Thomas agreed calmly, stepping further into the light. "You did." Pandemonium erupted. Men leapt to their feet, chairs crashing to the floor. Weapons were drawn, but no one fired. Their shock too complete, their superstitious fear too powerful. "I've come for justice, Seth," Thomas continued, moving steadily forward. "For Marshall Foster, who begged for his life before your brother. Executed him. For the Prescotts, who were traveling to meet their first grandchild. For Abigail Thornton, the schoolteacher, whose dreams died alongside her in that canyon. Seth backed away, his hand hovering near his revolver, but not quite daring to draw. "You can't be here," he insisted, voice cracking. "We buried you. Did you think that would stop me?" Thomas asked, continuing his inexorable approach. "Did you think a man who died for your greed would rest easy in the ground?" From the corner of his eye, Thomas caught a glimpse of movement along the far wall, two ravens using the distraction to edge closer to Seth. No one else noticed, all eyes fixed on the dead man walking among them. "Shoot him!" Seth finally commanded, finding his voice. "Shoot him, damn you all!" A few guns raised hesitantly, but no shots came. The outlaw directly beside Thomas crossed himself with trembling fingers. "You can't kill what's already dead," Thomas said softly. In that moment, Seth's nerve broke completely. He drew his revolver with desperate speed, firing 3 shots in rapid succession. Thomas felt one bullet tear through his coat sleeve, another whistle past his ear. The third struck something behind him with a dull thud. The gunshots shattered the spell of immobility that had gripped the room. Chaos erupted as men dove for cover, overturning tables and scrambling for positions. Some fled toward the doors while others stood frozen in superstitious terror. Thomas launched himself at Seth, driven by a cold rage that transcended fear. They crashed together against the far wall, the impact sending the crystal flying from Seth's neck. 2 ravens moved like liquid shadow, snatching it from midair before vanishing into the confusion. Seth fought with the frenzy of a cornered animal, his fist connecting with Thomas's jaw hard enough to send sparks across his vision. Thomas responded with calculated violence, driving his knee into the outlaw's stomach, then following with a punishing blow to his temple. "Your flesh," Seth gasped, spitting blood. "Just flesh, no ghost." "Perhaps," Thomas agreed, landing another blow, "but I bring their justice all the same." A single gunshot cracked across the chaos, louder somehow than the sporadic fire that had broken out across the room. Both Thomas and Seth turned to see Pinkerton Agent Reeves standing in the mission's main doorway, revolver raised toward the ceiling. "Nobody move," Reeves commanded, his voice cutting through the din like a whip. Behind him, a dozen armed men in distinctive Pinkerton coats poured into the sanctuary, weapons trained on the stunned outlaws. "Right on time, Agent," Thomas called, maintaining his grip on Seth's collar. Seth's eyes darted between Thomas and Reeves, realization dawning through his pain and fear. "A setup," he snarled. "You're working with the Pinkertons." "Justice comes in many forms," Thomas replied, hauling the outlaw to his feet as Reeves approached. "Seth Collingwood," the Pinkerton agent announced formally, "you're under arrest for multiple counts of murder, robbery, corruption of government officials, and conspiracy against the United States." He snapped handcuffs around Seth's wrists with evident satisfaction. "I've been looking forward to this for quite some time." As Reeves's men secured the remaining gang members, Thomas scanned the room for 2 ravens. The Cherokee had vanished completely, taking both crystals with him. A mixture of relief and sadness washed through Thomas. Relief that the heart had been recovered, sadness that he might never see his unlikely companion again. Outside, the sound of hoofbeats approached. Reinforcements, Thomas assumed, until he heard the distinctive jingle of cavalry spurs. A moment later, a uniformed army captain strode into the mission, flanked by a dozen soldiers. "What's the meaning of this?" the captain demanded, surveying the scene with evident displeasure. "This is a military operation, Reeves. Your agency has no jurisdiction." "Here." Reeves's expression hardened, but he maintained his professional demeanor. "Captain Hollister, I wasn't aware the army had taken an interest in the Collingwood gang." "National security," Hollister replied curtly. "We've been tracking them for months." His gaze settled on Seth, who had gone oddly still at the sight of the uniform. "And their activities regarding certain artifacts of interest." Thomas felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. He recalled 2 ravens' warning about betrayal, about the government's interest in the heart's power. "The Collingwood gang is responsible for the deaths of 6 civilians in a stage robbery," Reeves countered, maintaining his grip on Seth. "The Pinkerton agency was contracted by the stage company to bring them to justice." Captain Hollister smiled. thinly. "Admirable, and you've done excellent work which will be noted in my report." He gestured to his men. "But these prisoners will be remanded to military custody." Reeves stood his ground. "On what authority?" "Direct orders from the territorial governor," Hollister replied, producing an official-looking document. "The Collingwoods are suspected of stealing classified military intelligence. Their case falls under Army jurisdiction." Thomas watched the confrontation with growing apprehension. Seth Collingwood's expression had shifted from fear to something more calculated, recognition, perhaps even relief. The captain had referred to artifacts of interest. The connection was unmistakable. "Your governor's been taking Collingwood money for years," Thomas interjected, drawing surprised looks from both men. "Accepting bribes to look the other way while they terrorized the territory." Hollister's gaze fell on Thomas with cold assessment. "And you are?" "Thomas Blackwood," he replied simply. "The ghost," Seth muttered, earning a sharp look from the captain. "Mr. Blackwood was the sole survivor of the Shadow Canyon massacre," Reeves explained, still refusing to release his prisoner. "He's a material witness." Hollister studied Thomas with renewed interest. "Indeed. Then perhaps he can tell us about the Indian artifacts the Collingwoods acquired. The crystals with unusual properties." Before Thomas could respond, a commotion erupted outside. Shouts, followed by the distinctive sound of rifle fire. One of Hollister's men burst through the door, blood streaming from a gash above his eye. "Apache attack, sir," the soldier gasped. "They came out of nowhere, at least. 20 warriors." Hollister barked orders, his men moving with military precision toward defensive positions. The Pinkerton agents exchanged confused glances. Apache raids this far from their territory were virtually unheard of. Thomas alone understood what was happening. 2 Ravens hadn't abandoned him. He'd gone for help. The mission erupted into chaos as soldiers and Pinkerton agents scrambled to secure the building. Reeves maintained his grip on Seth, dragging the outlaw toward the relative safety of an interior room. "Come with us, Blackwood," the Pinkerton called. "Whatever's happening out there, you're still a witness we need to protect." Thomas hesitated, torn between following Reeves and seeking 2 Ravens. The decision was made for him when a figure appeared at the sanctuary's rear entrance. Not a Cherokee warrior, but a woman in a dust-covered riding habit, her face hauntingly familiar despite her disheveled appearance. "Abigail?" Thomas whispered, disbelieving. She moved toward him with purpose, ignoring the chaos around them. "Mr. Blackwood," she acknowledged, her voice exactly as he remembered from those long stage journeys. "We need to leave. Now." Thomas stood frozen, unable to reconcile her presence with what he knew to be true. "You died," he managed. "I saw it happen." "There's no time to explain," she insisted, gripping his arm with surprising strength. 2 Ravens sent me. The heart is in danger, and so are you." A bullet splintered the doorframe beside them, jolting Thomas from his shocked immobility. He allowed Abigail to pull him toward the exit, even as his mind raced to make sense of her impossible presence. Outside, the night had transformed into controlled bedlam. What Thomas had expected to be an Apache war party proved instead to be less than a dozen riders executing what appeared to be carefully planned diversionary attacks, striking at different points around the mission, creating an impression of far greater numbers. "This way," Abigail urged, leading him toward a horse tethered in the shadows. 2 Ravens is waiting at the rendezvous point." As they mounted, Thomas finally found his voice again. "How is this possible? I watched you die on that stage." Her expression softened momentarily. "I nearly did. The bullet passed through my shoulder, not my heart as the Collingwoods believed. I fell unconscious from blood loss and shock." She gathered the reins expertly. "When I woke, everyone else was dead. I dragged myself into the brush before they returned to check the bodies." "Why didn't you come forward?" Let people know you'd survived. For the same reason you became a ghost, she replied, spurring her horse into motion. Sometimes being dead is the only way to stay alive. They rode hard through the night, following a route that seemed to materialize before them, the same subtle pathways two ravens had shown Thomas earlier. Behind them, the sounds of conflict at the mission gradually faded, replaced by the rhythmic pounding of their horses' hooves and the whisper of wind through the juniper. Two ravens found me 3 days after the robbery, Abigail explained as they rode. I was delirious with fever from my untreated wound. He saved my life, then helped me disappear, then helped... Why? Thomas asked, struggling to absorb this new reality. Because he recognized something in me that responded to the heart, she said. A sensitivity to its energy that most people lack. He'd been searching for such a person, someone who could help guard the crystals if anything happened to him. The pieces began falling into place in Thomas's mind. That's why he was near Shadow Canyon that day. Not just tracking the Collingwoods, but looking for me, Abigail confirmed, though he didn't know who I was until he found me. He says the heart guided him. Dawn was breaking when they reached a sheltered canyon where two ravens waited, both crystals now reunited and glowing with steady blue-white light in his hands. He greeted them with evident relief. "You found him," he said to Abigail. "Good." "What happened back there?" Thomas asked, dismounting stiffly. "Those weren't Apache warriors." "Cherokee," two ravens corrected, "with some Navajo allies, friends, who understand what the heart means to all our peoples." His expression darkened. "The army has been seeking the crystals since James Collingwood first demonstrated their power. Captain Hollister leads that effort." Thomas processed this new information. "And Reeves, was he working with Hollister all along?" "No," two ravens replied. "The Pinkerton man seeks justice, as he claimed, but the army's authority supersedes his. Had they taken possession of Seth Collingwood, they would have forced him to reveal everything about the crystals," Abigail finished, "then silenced him permanently once they had what they wanted." Thomas sank onto a boulder. The events of the past weeks, the impossible journey through time, the confrontation at the mission, Abigail's miraculous survival, finally overwhelming him. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. Two ravens and Abigail exchanged looks that suggested they had already discussed this question at length. "The heart must return to my people," two ravens said firmly, "to be guarded as it has been for generations." "And I'm going with him," Abigail added, her tone brooking no argument. "There's nothing left for me in my old life. Everyone believes I'm dead. Even," she faltered slightly, "William Hargrove," Thomas supplied, remembering his confession in the Cave of Voices. Surprise flickered across her features. "You know about William?" "I know he was supposed to be on that stage instead of me," Thomas admitted. "I know you were meeting him in Silver City, and I know my actions kept him from being there." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "That's why you survived," she said softly. "Not just chance or luck. A debt," two ravens agreed. "One that must still be repaid." Thomas met his gaze questioningly. "How?" "By ensuring Seth Collingwood faces justice for what he did," the Cherokee replied. "By making certain the heart remains safe from those who would misuse it, and by delivering a message to William Hargrove." "What message?" Thomas asked. Abigail reached into her pocket, withdrawing a folded paper sealed with wax. "This," she said, simply. "My words, not yours. You've carried enough burdens for us both." Thomas accepted the letter with a sense of both responsibility and release. "I'll find him," he promised. "Whatever it takes." The sun had fully risen now, painting the canyon. Walls in hues of amber and gold, The three unlikely companions shared a simple meal as they finalized their plans. Two ravens and Abigail would travel deep into Cherokee territory, where the heart would be protected by ancient traditions and natural barriers. Thomas would return to civilization, ensure Seth Collingwood's prosecution, and deliver Abigail's message. "Our paths separate here," Two Ravens said finally, rising to his feet, "but they remain connected through what we have shared." Thomas stood as well, extending his hand to the man who had saved his life multiple times. "I don't know how to thank you." The Cherokee clasped his forearm in the warrior's grip. "Live worthy of your second chance. That is thanks enough." Abigail approached next, her expression complicated with emotions Thomas couldn't fully decipher. "I never blamed you," she said quietly, "for taking William's place, for surviving when others didn't. Some things are meant to be, however painful the path. The schoolteacher I met on that stage would never have survived in this world," Thomas observed. "But you've become something else entirely." "As have you," she replied with a small smile. "Perhaps that's the gift hidden within tragedy, the chance to remake ourselves when everything familiar is stripped away." She embraced him briefly, then moved to join Two Ravens by their horses. The Cherokee had wrapped the crystals carefully, securing them in his medicine pouch for the journey ahead. "One last thing," Two Ravens called as Thomas prepared to mount. "His own horse. The cave of voices showed you truth about yourself. Remember that truth when doubt finds you again." Thomas nodded solemnly. "I will." He watched them ride away, two figures gradually diminishing against the vastness of the landscape, carrying with them secrets that the world of banks and railroads and territorial governors could never comprehend. His own path led in the opposite direction, back to Seth Collingwood's reckoning, to William Hargrove's unburdened conscience, to whatever new life awaited a man who had journeyed beyond death itself and returned transformed. As Thomas Blackwood rode toward that uncertain future, he felt the weight of the dead lift slightly from his shoulders. He had been the only man to survive a stage robbery, but he was no longer defined by that survival alone. He had become something rarer still, a man who had found purpose in the shadow of tragedy and peace in the pursuit of justice. The canyon. Walls fell away behind him as he urged his horse into a gallop, leaving ghostly whispers and ancient magic behind. Ahead lay a world that believed Thomas Blackwood dead and buried, a world about to discover just how wrong it had been. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these. Up! Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.